Often. You're muted.
I got it. Yeah. Sorry, I had to get the recording and process out of the way. But anyway, thank you so much for having me, Stephen. It's good to be here. And now I know where so many of my home group members go when they leave 5 minutes early on Tuesday night. So good to see you guys that I just saw 10 minutes ago. My name's Cyndi Masters. I'm an alcoholic. And because of the grace of God, some simple actions in this program and both sides of sponsorship, I've been sober every single day in a row since December the 17th, 1985. That's my miracle. I still can't believe it. It's the biggest blessing in my life. And boy, when I got here, did I think it was my curse? You know, did I think it was my curse? So I was just thinking when I came here and there were already people here that I just saw a few minutes ago. I chair the Great Facts meeting on Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock. And I've done that, I don't know, 15 or 16 months. And I'll do it until they tell me that it's somebody else's turn. And, but I love doing it. And I was thinking, you know, the home group that I always wanted in person, which I've had, it is a home group where people support each other. They love each other and they support each other going to meetings and things like that. And I never imagined I'd get that virtually, but I do. You know, we have a real home group with real people who really care about each other. And I feel blessed beyond measure. I've sponsored people that I've just met virtually. I've sponsored women that got sober online. I never thought that could happen. And so what all this new world has done is it's opened my eyes and my mind, because I think I get so stuck on the way I got sober is the way everybody needs to, because it's the best way, and it was the best way for me, and it worked for me. And I forget that God's bigger than all of it, and I forget that God's really, really in charge, and that, you know, that AA and God are bigger than any division or any. God just makes a way. And how lucky are we? I got here originally in 1980. I did not get here, and I'm one of the stories in the forward to the second edition. You know, 50% of us that came and really tried, meaning to me, what that means is really came and tried to work the steps and do the deal. 50% get sober right away. But a few of us, it takes a little longer. And I did try. I tried the best I could. The best I could wasn't that good, though, to be honest. I got here originally in 1980 with what most people would consider a very low bottom. I got here, I'd been on the streets. I had 7 felonies. I was barely 17 years old, being tried as an adult. I had never gone to high school, except for when I was in an institution, and you go from institution to institution, go for a little bit. I didn't have a dream, a hope, anything. And alcohol had, in my opinion, what happened was when I drank for the effect, just like it talks in the big book. What it did was it helped me not feel as much. It helped me not hurt as much. And so I still saw alcohol as my friend. I couldn't connect the dots that when I drank, the very thing that used to soothe me when I was in pain was creating the pain. It was setting the ball in motion, and I just couldn't see. You know, I was still seeing from an old pair of eyes. And so the first time that I went into seizures in jail, and that was my good news, and I got an opportunity to go to treatment, and I was introduced to you guys. And at first I was mad because I was there, and then I was like, I wish I could be like them. I wish I could be an alcoholic and it be as easy for me as it is for them, because what you were saying sounded really easy. It sounded like, go work these little steps and your life's going to be okay. I thought, boy, I wish I had this alcoholism. I wish I did. And they told me, Cyndi, just work those steps. Your life could be different. And I wanted to, but I was so afraid that if I worked them and it didn't work, it would prove that everybody else had been right, that I was just so broken and that I was beyond repair, even in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I hung out in Alcoholics Anonymous without the steps. And I don't think there's anything more painful than not drinking and not being sober. You know, it's because I'm left with this committee in my head, which is really like a firing squad. Man, you piece of junk. You know, I don't know what your head says to you, but my head told me how terrible I am. And back then it was hell to sit still with that. And so I got drunk. And I took people in AA out drinking with me. And I committed felonies. And I had to become an emancipated adult. I'd been around AA for like 6 months at that point. And they sent me to a halfway house in Lexington, Kentucky. I was the youngest person that went there. And I was still 17, but I was an emancipated adult. And I learned some things in that halfway house. The thing that started to connect for me with that relapse, and this is what I think it means in the forward to the second edition for some of us, that relapse started to connect that I drank and bad thing happened. You know, like before that, I thought bad things always happen to Cyndi and she drinks and she feels better. And so the narrative began to change a little bit because I'd listened to you and it was like, well, I drank and look where I am. And when I wasn't drinking, even though I was miserable because I wasn't working the steps, I didn't go to jail, I didn't get arrested, no bad things happened. And so when I thought I had surrendered because I knew that I was powerless over alcohol and I knew that my life had never been manageable. For me, what I'll tell you about later when I finally did surrender is that surrender is at a whole different level than that. That's admission. That's why it's 30 pages in the big book before it says we surrender to our own innermost self. This is a first step in recovery. So I went to that halfway house and they made me do things that I didn't want to do. And I learned that I can't change the way I feel first. You know, I learned that when I change what I do, I change how I feel. You know, they said, Cyndi, go to meetings early and help make coffee. You know what happens when you do that? Or when you show up early at Zoom, whatever. I started to feel like I belonged. People started to know my name. I stopped feeling like a foreigner in Alcoholics Anonymous. Then they said, Cyndi, you need to get a JOB. I didn't have a driver's license in foster homes and institutions. There's nobody to sign for it. You know, so I didn't have a driver's license. I had a job history from the streets, but it's not one you could put on paper. And so there weren't many job opportunities, but I got a job setting tobacco in the fields. Because see, they didn't care how I felt about that job. They just said I had to get one anyway. You know what happened when I got a job and I started to pay for my own Denny's after the meeting instead of manipulating people in AA to do it for me? My shoulders started to go back just a little bit and my chin started to go up just a little bit because I was doing things that people that have self-respect and dignity do. And what happened was I wanted to feel like I had self-respect before I did those things. And it works the exact opposite. So what happened, I started acting like people that have self-respect and I started having self-respect. And I started to like myself a little bit and look the world in the eye. I went back to Cincinnati, got my GED. That was kind of a big deal because I didn't know that I could. And I did, and it wasn't hard for me. And I went back to Cincinnati, which was home base. I bottomed out in DC, bottomed out in Cincinnati, got sober in Cincinnati, got sober in Lexington. And I was an AA Wonder Girl. And for those of you that have been to in-person meetings or been around long enough to watch somebody come in with a real low bottom and they just get a little bit better, more like, holy moly, they talk in complete sentences. And we applaud people because they're getting better. You know, it doesn't take a lot, you know, to all of a sudden be an AA Wonder Girl. And I was pretty smart. I had a great memory and I read the big book and I memorized it. And so I would run around AA and quote that thing. And, you know, I loved Alcoholics Anonymous. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, ever. And you had me speaking everywhere. And man, I felt like the belle of the ball, you know, and I had my own place to live. I even got a driver's license and a car. When I got here, my dreams were so low. Like, it's hard to describe how low they were. I couldn't imagine owning a car. I couldn't imagine having an apartment, let alone a house. I couldn't imagine any of that. And so these little things are happening. But more importantly, I found my family. See, you have remained my family. I found people that wanted me to be better. And to me, that's what family is. Family is that no matter what, I want you to be the best you can be. And I'll do everything I can to help you be that. And that's what I got from you all. And you know what? I started doing so good, and I started doing volunteer work, and I went through my amends, and I did all these things, and I got this job, and it was like this executive position that I had no business in. But you taught me how to talk good. And let's think about it. We talk good in AA. We learn how to talk. And so I got this job that I had no business, and I was the youngest person in, and I was the only national employee in this spot. I was the only national employee without a college degree. And they gave me a secretary and a business card. And man, I was trying to live up to that. I went to Oak Street in Cincinnati, passed my business card out. And I went to that job, and I was so afraid. Because see, I knew I didn't know how to do the job. And I knew that they would figure out I didn't know how to do the job. And I knew that they would figure out that my record had been expunged 2 years before, and they would do enough research to find out who I really was. And I was so full of shame and fear. And that's not where the problem began. Where the problem began is that I came to Oak Street because, see, I've always got to be more to be enough. I got to have a little nicer car so it's good enough for you to ride in. I have to have a little nicer house so it's good enough for me to invite you in. I have to know a little bit more about the big book so I can fit with you. And now I got to have a little better job so I can talk to you about work. And so what I start doing is passing that business card out. And instead of coming here and telling you the truth and saying, I have this job and I'm scared and I don't know what to do, instead, I played a big shot in Alcoholics Anonymous. They talk about us playing a big shot in the bar. I was doing it in AA. And I got more and more full of self-hatred and self-loathing, more and more, because that's what happens when I'm not authentic and I'm not honest. And then the more full of self-hatred and shame, because see, alcoholics, I don't think that we're necessarily born liars, cheats, and thieves. I think we develop that skill set. And I think we're so sensitive that we can't stand ourselves for it. So we get in this terrible cycle. And that's what happened to me. When I do the wrong thing, it eats my lunch and I have to drink. See, when I do the wrong thing, I hate myself. And then I drink, and then I do more wrong things. And it's this terrible cycle. So I was at that job about a year. I was turning 3 years sober. I had turned 21 years old, and I woke up drunk. And I was relieved. And the reason that I was relieved is I didn't know I was allowed to quit my gift. I didn't want that job. I didn't know how to do that job, and I couldn't win at that job. But I didn't think I was allowed to quit my blessing. See, it was like, what a blessing I got that job. I didn't know I could make a different choice because I had all this crazy invisible rules on my life. So when I woke up drunk, I knew I didn't have to go back. I knew I had a reason to not work that job. And I went to Oak Street the next day, and I raised my hand at the lunch meeting that I went to most days. And I said, I drank. And boy, there were some people shocked. And I said, and I want to be sober. And I meant it with all my heart. And I left that meeting, and guess what I did? I bought my first legal bottle of whiskey. And I meant I didn't want to drink again. But see, what happens is once I drink a little bit, that thing it talks about in the doctor's opinion, that's really me. Once I drink just a little bit, I have this big thing inside of me that wants some more. And even though my brain says, no, I don't really want more, this little craving inside of me, and then that obsession about a drink, that thing that's just there. Next thing I know, I drink. This went on for almost a year. I would try to come back to AA a lot in the beginning, and towards the end of the year, I didn't try to come back so much. Towards the end of the year, my drinking life had become normal. Now, my first time I came in AA was what anybody would consider a low bottom in AA. It had all the bravado, all the gut. My bottom, finally getting sober, had no bravado, and it was very mediocre. And what's the worst thing for an alcoholic to be? Mediocre, right? Like, I'm going to be the worst drunk or the best drunk, but I was a mediocre, average garden variety alcoholic. And what I did is that if you had booze, we drank on you. If I had booze, we drank on me. My drinking life became normal. I worked to drink. I drank to manage to try to deal with this. My last drunk was December 16th, 1985. And I'm a blackout drinker. And for me, what being a blackout drinker means is that I can come to in the middle of a conversation and have to figure out where I am, who I'm talking to, what's going on. And as a woman, especially a woman that comes from the streets, I woke up in some terribly traumatic spots, positions, places. And I've had some bad things happen because of my drinking. And so anytime I'm coming out of a blackout, I'm full of terror. And so I'm coming out of a blackout and I'm scared to death. Where am I? Can I get home? Am I safe? Now, I gotta always describe the kind of sexy alcoholic I am. And the reason I do that is not for you, and it's not to be gross, but it's to remember I'm a long time away from my last drink. I need never forget it. And I need never forget what it really was, what really brought me to my knees, what let me surrender. And that night I had puked on myself, which was pretty normal. And I have peed on myself, which was pretty normal. And I'm sitting and I'm crying like a little baby because I can't figure out where I live. I can't figure out how to get home. And here's the pitiful, incomprehensible, demoralizing thing about that night. I was sitting right in front of where I lived. See, that's where my alcoholism takes me. That was worse than any jail, any institution, anything. It was worse. And it was the night I surrendered. And I told you, I'd tell you what the difference of that was for me. And the difference in surrender and admission was that in that night, I knew inside me, right here in my very deepest part of me, that was as good as it would ever get if I kept drinking. I knew that it could never be different, no matter how much money I got, no matter how much education I got, no matter whether I had people that loved me, coping skills, because I had always in the back of my head lingering doubts that said, if I had this or I had that or I had that, maybe I could drink like other people. Well, if we're worried about drinking like other people, chances are we really belong here. You know, like, who is that their goal, right? And the next day I got sober, and I got sober differently. You know, I'd memorized that big book, and I was big book Cyndi, and I knew about the Oxford group, and I just knew a lot. And I got a sponsor that didn't know near as much as I did. She only knew how to, like, get happy, get married, have a couple kids, and, you know, work the steps and help other girls. And I thought she was going to be so honored that Big Book Cyndi asked her to be her sponsor. And the first thing she said to me is, well, Cyndi, I'll sponsor you if you no longer quote the big book. What was I going to say? What was my identity in AA going to be? So my first step in humility was I agreed to that. She said, you can paraphrase it as it applies in your life, but that's it. Because see, I knew how to talk about it. I knew how to memorize it, but I didn't know how to apply it. And this book isn't a thank and no one program. It's not. This book is about having a spiritual experience. It's about one alcoholic helping another. And it's about a transformation that happens only from our Creator. And I missed the boat because I was busy memorizing. I was busy using that big book to show you how good and how important I was. Well, guess what? In AA, there's no hierarchy. I don't even care if you know all about the Washingtonians. It's shoulder to shoulder, one drunk to another. The next thing she did was make me really look at the first step, and I'm grateful, and I spend a lot of time on the first step. And the reason I do that is the only step we must take 100%. It's the only step we've got to get perfect if we're going to stand a chance. If we can't own that step, if you can't completely define the problem 100%, it's very challenging to put a solution on it. And she said, powerlessness and unmanageability. Well, you've heard my story. That's easy for me. I've always been powerless, and I've never had a manageable life. She said, I want you to dig a little deeper. And this is important to me. It's not in the book, but it's my story. She said, She said, I want you to tell me the most probable consequences if you drink again. Well, that's easy. What do we all say? I'll go to a jail, I'll go to a mental hospital, or I'll die, right? Well, here's what she said to me. She said, Cyndi, you're not afraid of any of that. And she's right. I grew up in jail. I'm good there. Like, I'm almost the vice president. I might not do as good there now. I've been sober a long time. But back then, that was home. And in the mental hospital, I was in state mental hospitals in the 70s, guys. State mental hospitals in the 70s were pretty nasty. But here's the good news. The bar is so low, it's easy to be a success in the nut ward. It's just not hard to be queen bee. So I do good there. And she pointed that out. See, I wasn't afraid of either one of those things. And then she said, Cyndi, death's just the next adventure for you. You're not afraid of that either. And she's right. See, I've ridden Harley my whole recovery. That's not somebody particularly afraid of dying statistically, you know? And so I want you to dig deeper. And I'm so glad she did. Because what I came up with is the worst thing that happens to me is I drink and live. I lived 30 years the way that I'd been living. I don't get the privilege and the luxury of dying. See, I tried to die. I tried to kill myself. I wound up in ICUs, all kinds of things. I've got scars, leftover stuff from all that. But I'm kind of like a cockroach, really hard to kill. And you'll hear more about that even sober. And so for me, what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to spend the rest of my life hurting people. I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous long enough to know that if I did your deal, I got a sense of purpose and I got to make a difference in people's lives, and that people smiled when I showed up instead of being afraid. I don't have the ability to love when I drink because the drink always comes first. Even when I lie to myself and say it doesn't, I'm going to show up, but I don't really show up. Matter of fact, I don't show up at the most important times because me and what I need and how I feel always comes first. And I didn't want to ever see that hollow look. You know that look, like when we totally disappointed somebody? You know that look when somebody thought it was going to be different this time and they get sucked in and they believe us? I don't want to ever see that again. That's why I want to be sober. And that's still why I am in the middle of this deal. I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and it is because I don't want to be that person. Now, I'm a big book step person. I don't quote it much, but I'll share it. I'll share with you how I live it. And I'll share with you how I put it on my life. And I'll share with you what it looks like. And I'll share with you what a transformed life looks like. And here's the great news. If you've been around here a while, I've had transformation after transformation after transformation. Every single time I thought, I've become so different. It's the best it could ever be. I then discover some other shortcomings and defects, and then I discover that I get better than I ever thought I could be again. And that's the beautiful thing about a lifetime journey with the steps. I'm going to share with you some things where the rubber meets the road sober, because hopefully you have a sponsor, and if you don't, get one. Because this program's one drunk talking to another, holding your hand, walking you through those steps in the book. That's really where the magic happens. And then we have the spiritual experience that transforms us, and then we do it again. I had this 6-year period from the time I was, when I was 11 years sober, my grandma died. It broke my heart in a million pieces. My grandma was my safe person when I was a little kid. I had people that really loved me, I've learned. They just couldn't do it every day. But my grandma could do it every day. And she taught me about God, and she's the only person who didn't make me afraid of God. She said, God loves you. And she went to church all the time. That's all she said, saying, God loves you. She exampled what I learned later here. And it made it a lot easier to hear God love me here, because she's the only other person said that besides you. You know, there was a period on the end of it. And she taught me, like, fear and faith are always in here. And they are. They're human emotions. But which one do I feed? That's what wins. See, if I pay attention to fear and nurture it, I'm in trouble. But if I pay attention to faith and nurture it, fear dissipates. So here was a big deal. My grandmother was terrified when she died. And I got so mad at God that I took a walk in the dark at 12 years sober. And what I mean by a walk in the dark was that I didn't want nothing to do with God. I was so angry. I thought, if you take this perfect little lady that did nothing but serve your kids her whole life and let her be afraid to meet you, you're not somebody I want to serve or want anything to do with. What I did right. My feet moved where my brain and heart didn't want to. I kept going to meetings. And when I went to meetings, I didn't lie. I didn't pretend. I didn't go in with my 11-year sober persona. Anybody have that? I'm this year long sober. This is how I should behave. I didn't do any of that. I went to meetings and I cried like a little baby and said, I can't feel God and I'm so lonely and I'm so angry. I told my truth and I believe it saved my life. The other thing that I did was I kept looking for God. If God would show up, I was open to it. So I wasn't like, if God would show up, I was open to it. And that Harley Davidson, I rode my whole recovery. See, that Harley's where I met God. I had this firing squad in my head and it was just torment to sit still. And they want you to meditate around here. Well, sitting still, maybe with a whole pack of cigarettes, right? And I bought a Harley and it vibrated more than me. And it was louder than all that stuff in my head. And I could feel God in the wind. God will meet us wherever we are. We just have to want to. And so I got on Interstate 65 and here in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was doing somewhere between 65 and 70, as is the rest of traffic. And the next thing I know, kaboom, I'm hit. And according to the police report, I was catapulted 17 foot in the air. And I came down and I landed on a car driving down the middle of the highway. I landed on the hood. I rolled off that hood and that car drove up me. My face has had over 24 surgeries putting it back together. My ribs went through my lungs. I'm laying on the highway. I can't breathe because when your ribs go through the lungs, they collapse. And when you can't breathe, you're dying. And I got really afraid, probably like my grandmother. And if you think about it, we're afraid to change home groups. Of course, we're afraid of the big adventure, right? And when I finally let go, because when you're actually dying, you don't get a lot of choice. At some point, there's no longer choice. And I got through the fear and then I let go and I got wrapped in the most love I've ever known in my life. I just got wrapped in love. How lucky am I to have had that experience? Now, I lived, it's never a surprise at this point, but with a lot of things. I have a traumatic brain injury. That great memory, nah. I had a spinal cord injury. I lost everything I owned, my little business, all my material things at 12 years sober. My face looked like this. Little kids were afraid of me. So the outside things that I thought gave me value sober were gone. My looks, my intelligence, and my ability to make money. I was on food stamps and they fast-tracked me to Social Security disability. So what will matter of my life? Well, you know who took care of me? You guys. My family came 1 week. It's what they could do. You guys stayed the duration. You took me to all my surgeries. You took me to all my appointments. You brought my meals. You took care of me. You slept on my couch because I was having seizures. You loved me better. And you brought me newcomers. You brought me new girls feeling sorry for themselves. And they walk in the house and say, tell Cyndi what you told us, because they'd see me, man, I was scary, right? And so after a little coaxing, she said, well, Cyndi, well, my boyfriend left. I don't know how I'm going to go on. And I'd have a seizure. She'd feel better. And let me tell you how I partnered with God. Because see, we got to partner with God. God doesn't happen to us. God gets invited with us. And my partnership with God was I let it be enough. I didn't say, God, having a seizure cannot be the most useful I can be in life. What happened was people come to my house, they'd be sad. I can't even remember their name by the time they leave because my brain injury is so fresh. They'd leave, they'd be happy. And I felt like Gandhi. See, I let it be enough for me to be useful. And when I'm useful, do you know what happens? I don't care what's wrong. This is the same as why I made coffee. When I have something to give, my life's worth living. And I get better. And I started to get a little better. I'm still having lots of surgeries. This is a 6-year stint I'm going to tell you about sober. I think I needed that wreck because I was a street girl and I had this edge still, and that wreck ripped me wide open. I could not be guarded with you anymore. And I felt your love all the way inside of me. And then I felt God's love because I felt yours. Oh, I'm so blessed. So I'm starting to get better. I'm starting to have hope. And I got stage 3 breast cancer. And so I spent most of the next year doing chemo and radiation. Guess who took care of me? You guys. You brought my meals. You took me to chemo. You held the bucket while I puked. And you never got tired of me, and you never seemed to get tired of helping me. And it was kind of cool because I've been sober a little while, and it gave new girls a chance to get to be with me. And it gave me a chance to be with them. And anytime that kind of magic happens, we get the magic that's Alcoholics Anonymous. And at the end of chemo, I was still a recipient of the Traumatic Brain Injury Trust Fund. They were coming to my house to help me learn how to organize bills and stuff. And I got the bright idea I'd start a business. and I did. And it started to get a tiny bit of traction because Social Security lets you stay on it for like 15 months. So I didn't have to make a lot of money from it. And so, so I got a chance to start it. And then I started to fall and not be able to get up. When I was a kid, I got kicked through doors and my back got broken. The wreck pushed it forward and they had to go in and cut part of my spinal canal and reconstruct my lower back. Every single thing that's ever happened to me has had a bunch of gifts in it if I didn't get so mad that life wasn't going my way. As long as I don't get mad and say my way, like a 2-year-old, no matter how bad it is, if I'll just roll into it, I get the best gifts. The gift of this was it re-triggered all the trauma of being kicked through doors and bad things happened to me physically as a little kid. And it forced me to do a new level of forgiveness. And see, I didn't ever realize that forgiveness was taking a hook out of my mouth, not yours. I didn't know it took that for me to be a free woman. I tried to do it before, but somehow it was time. And I forgave the man that broke my back. And I love him. See, it was the beginning of me learning that, we don't shoot our wounded in AA, but we don't in our families either. And it was my beginning of seeing him as human. It was my beginning of being able to see someone else's pain who had done a lot of pain to me. And in that, I didn't need anything from him anymore. And so I could begin to forgive him. I'm actually like a terrific daughter these days. And that's a miracle. And it's not for him, it's for me. And then the grand finale of that 6 years, what I'm telling you happened in 6 years, guys. And I wouldn't tell you because it sounds fictitious, except that people in AA here in Louisville took care of me every step. Everything in my story has been witnessed by people still alive in AA. I'm so fortunate. So I bought a house. My business started to do a little bit. And I bought a house and I was showing a contractor my attic. And I fell through the rafters and landed on my neck in the doorway below. And my C5 split in half. And I was paralyzed from the chest down. And I spent 3 months in Baptist East Hospital here. They did a miraculous surgery. They removed my C5 vertebrae. I have an artificial neck. Then I got an infection. It was a hard ride. And it's the first time through all this 6 years that I didn't want to live. I was tired. I said, I don't want to live paralyzed. I just don't. And my friends said they didn't care how I felt. They said they've been holding my hand. It was my time to just get up when I didn't want to. And I've been so blessed because I'm standing here. I'm not sitting down. I got a standing desk and I stand it up. And I'm standing here talking to you and I have a full life and I'm really lucky. And I live with so much physical pain. And I've learned all these tools and I sponsor a lot of women that are like in their 80s. And I have so much experience at what they're going through now that I get to be super helpful. I've faced death so many times. It's like there's not anything that's ever happened that doesn't turn out to be a gift. So fast forward a little bit, right? That business that nobody thought would make it, that little business I started on disability is now a global enterprise. And I have clients all over the world. And it's not because of me, it's in spite of me. I can't do the thing my business does. I just run it like the traditions and the concepts, and it seems to have worked out because I've been in and out of hospitals the entire time I've owned it. I've never, like, this last few years is the longest I've ever been not in a hospital my whole recovery. And I'm grateful. Although there's some magical things that happen when I'm sick and in the hospital, because I'm so vulnerable that people like get real with me and they're not afraid to share like all the way. They're not afraid. And I get to know people in such an intimate, deep way. And what an honor is that? What an honor is that? I'll tell you this, the harder than that is the successes. See, we're good. We're good at getting through a bunch of hard stuff. We know how, it's been our lives, most of us, right? We just get over things. We move, we go. And if we are fortunate enough in AA to get a new attitude, to learn how to be where our hands and feet are, to learn how to rely on this creator in the moment, we don't ever have to feel bad no matter what happens around us. It's a promise that's in the 12th step and the 12 and 12. Nothing outside of us can shake us to our spiritual roots. And I've been happy. I've been really happy through just about everything because I've had you. I've had you and God, and that's more than I ever dreamed I would have, ever. It's still the most important thing to me. You, I love you. I do. I love you. And so I started getting success, and the mayor puts you on committees and nonprofits put you on their boards. And, I'm on this committee for the big school board here. All these things. And they start giving you awards and telling you how important you are to the community. Do you know how bad that is for us? That is bad for us. That is bad. It's like, and that is dangerous. It's like, that's dangerous for me because that's a temptation to say, Cyndi, you're spending an awful lot of time in AA. Look at those women you meet with every night, and that dominates your life. See, because I still got that crazy, right? And thank God I've never listened to that because I've been sponsored, because I've been in the center of AA, because I sponsor. I've known what my right size is. And I've stayed in the center of Alcoholics Anonymous regardless of all of that. But that's a tease for my ego. That's miracle growth for my ego. It's not good for me. It's not. And so I think that the reason why I got to have some success, and I have a lot of success, but I think I have that to tell you it doesn't matter. And that my very happiest in Alcoholics Anonymous, my very, very happiest was when I first got sober and I had nothing to lose. And when I had the wreck and I had nothing to lose because there were no expectations and all I had to do was be sober and help other people. And that's my sweet spot. That's where I'm happiest. In 2010, my brother was murdered. He's my Irish twin. We're 9 months apart. It broke my heart a million ways to Sunday. You're getting a little can pitch tonight. I'm sorry, I'm tired. But so if you've heard my story before, you've probably heard a little bit of this. But when I first got sober, my cousin died, and she was my favorite cousin. And I looked at her in her coffin and I felt nothing. See, alcohol robbed me of being a human being. It robbed me of being a whole human being. I didn't have my whole library of feelings. I didn't care. I had been stripped of my humanness. I didn't have humanity. When my brother was murdered, I sobbed. I cried. I had my whole library of feelings. I hurt so much. How lucky am I? Because I loved him so much. Now that hurt didn't take me to my knees. I'm not afraid to hurt. That's what you gave me. All these feelings are just feelings. And if I be where my hands and feet are, there's nothing that I can't deal with in the right now. And there's nothing I can deal with in yesterday or tomorrow. And my life has forced me to be in the right now. The beautiful thing that happened with my brother's murder, I'm telling you, there's something beautiful that has happened in everything that's ever happened in my life that's been catastrophic. I hated my mother. Now, I've been sober since 85. We're talking 2010. I blamed my mother for all the institutions. I blamed her because when children's services came in, she lied. She protected him. I blamed her. And I didn't understand why she didn't protect us. And that stayed residual. I thought I had worked through it. When my brother was murdered, I looked at my mom in the face, and I've never seen more pain in my entire life. And I have looked at hollow people on the streets, and I have never seen more pain than I saw in that mother's eyes. And for the first time, I saw her as human. And I understood that she was wounded too. See, I had become well enough and whole enough, because that's what happens here. I've been waiting for her to fix my brokenness. And what happened is, on accident, by working the steps and getting a relationship with God, my brokenness was healed. And I didn't need anything from her, and I could see her. And she couldn't protect me. We don't shoot our wounded. She was wounded. I don't know what wounded her, but I know she was hurt. And all I want was her to feel better. 3 months later, I had a surgery. I always have surgeries. And I had a surgery, and they cut out 18 inches of my colon. I got septic. And I thought I was going to die. And my mom's there, and she's holding my hand. She says, "Please don't die. I can't take it." Maybe that's why I live. And she turned 70 while I was in the hospital. And that woman, when I look back, and I don't blame her, and I don't look at what she took from me, and I don't assign that responsibility to her, I think, what a hard and challenging life she's had. What a challenging life she's had. And I just want her to be happy. And so the next year, my sister and I took her and my aunt to Kenya on safari for her dream trip. And my mom smiled again. Now, fast forward, last year during COVID, she turned 80. And she was mad. She's like, "I'm not turning 80 in COVID. You're not taking my 80th year away." She's all mad. And she didn't want to have a birthday. I went and got all these people that she knew from all around the world that were like in their 80s to make 1 and 2 minute videos telling my mom what she meant to them. Now, I'm telling you, that's the most love and tolerance I've ever had in my life. Because if you've ever tried to get an 80-year-old to make videos virtually, it is a challenge. But they did, and I did, and we did, and I got an hour's worth of 1 and 2 minute videos. And so on our birthday, December 29th, this past year, I went to Cincinnati, and I stuck that little stick in her computer. And she's feeling sorry for herself because it's what she knows. And she started watching. And her whole neighborhood loves her. They made videos for me. They did a little parade with videos. I mean, I got to see my mom through other people's eyes, and how blessed am I. And for the first time in my entire life, I watched my mom cry happy tears. And I realized it was the first time in my life. And I realized that she'd never been able to afford to be that happy. And what a gift I got to give her. And then when she feels sad, guess what she does? She turns that hour on, and she hears how much people love her. But see, she doesn't have you. See, all I got to do is come here. And I can just say I'm a little sad. And you know what you all do? You tell me you love me. You give me what that video gave my mom. You give me a place I belong, and I fit, and I matter. You are the most important thing in my life, you and my creator. COVID too has been good to me. At first it was hard. I felt like I was back in an institution because I wasn't allowed to leave, and it triggered a few things I had to see. That's what happens. We do the best we can at the time, and then things visit again. And when they visit again, if we don't fight them, we can work right through them, work the steps through them, and we get a whole new level of freedom didn't know possible. And that's what happened to me in COVID. And my meditation practice went through the roof. So instead of spending 20 minutes, because I run all these businesses and I have this busy, crazy life, I spent an hour and a half. And I took up Native American flute, and it's all about breath. And I learned how to totally tap into my best listening device right here and feel this creator who I can't describe, but who I know loves me and loves you, who I know expresses himself here. And I got so close to my creator. Now, back at the office, back to conquer the world, right? What's the first thing starts to get less? That hour and a half, before long it's a half hour, and I've caught it. And that's not going to be my story. I'm not going to give up my relationship and not just relationship. See, because we can have relationships with people or God or anything, but they're shallow and they're hollow and they don't really have depth and meaning. I'm not going to give up this depth in the relationship I have with my creator, which makes me to be able to be more available to you. So that's going to be my focus. I'm not work, you and God, because that's where the only real happiness happens for me. It's the only thing that really matters. And the people in AA that, I'll say this, the highest we get is servant here. And if you look for who the happiest people in AA are, you'll see that they're the busiest. You'll see the ones that they say, yes, I'll sponsor you. Yeah, I'll take time to take you through the book. Of course I will. Yeah, why don't you join my big book study? Those people shine because it is only in the giving in Alcoholics Anonymous, us self-centered people. It is only in the giving that we find truth and get centered with ourselves. Thank you for giving me a life that's so worth living. And thanks for listening to me tonight.